There you have David Mahlobo. He is the chairperson of that subcommittee. Will give us more details on some of the resolutions that have been taken. Let's listen in.
Stability Comrade David Mahlobo on behalf of the Commission.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Zizi, and a very good afternoon to the members of the media and those who are listening. Firstly, we just concluded the work and presented to the plenary, and our report has been accepted. In the main, there are no major changes that have happened in terms of the report we presented here in July after the National Policy Conference. Safe to say that we did an assessment of the security situation in the world, reconfirmed that South Africa remained relatively stable, look at the new developments that we've seen, especially in the main, the issues around the security situation that is becoming more unstable. If you look at the Korean Peninsula, the situation in Syria, the challenges that we are facing with respect to some parts of our continent. One of the issues that we're to look at is the outcome of the discussion between the African Union and the European Union, especially that has necessitated what we call it modern day slavery and the mechanism that needed to be addressed. Also, the assessment that the unilateral decision taken by the US government around the question of its embassy on the question of Palestine and Israel conflict is a situation we looked at. We also look at the situation that happened, the escalation of terrorism and terror attacks, especially in our own continent. And then lastly, we also noted the transition that happened in Zimbabwe and our view that stability and peace should be able to continue to prevail. On sectoral work, we never went into too much details. Safe to say that when it came to issues around correctional services, the issue around the prisoner transfer has been confirmed that an adequate legislation must be able to be developed so that we can deal with those particular issues. That will also necessitate some review of multilateral and bilateral agreements we've signed. And we've also looked to say, what do we do to deal with the issues of petty crimes, to deal with the issues of capacity that are there in our prisons. On Home Affairs, we've reconfirmed everything. Safe to say there's a new injunction by the free movement of people. Remember, by the decision that was taken by the African Union. In other words, to have a free movement of people and the issues of visas and the question of one passport. And South Africa, as we agreed in the AU meeting of heads of state and government, we should then be able to look at our domestication of our own laws. The work around the implementation of the Border Management Agency will proceed. As you know, that Parliament has reached a stage that it has concluded its own processes. We need to be able to deal with that one. When it came to issues of defense, nothing has changed around defense, except that the issue around using defense as an innovation hub and the capability to be able to create our own revenue, because the defense industry can contribute to industrialization, it can create other opportunities that are there. We think it's very important. The implementation of the defense review and the capacity that needs to be there, and the continued support that our defense has to play, especially in the contribution of peace and security within the continent that we play. Those are the main issues we have looked at, where we are saying that the incoming NEC must also be in a position working with government in the main around the question of Denel. so that at least we know that in the main tunnel and the main shareholder and where the product is coming from. Because of security reasons, remember, it's not only commercial part, then there's a security element. We also had an opportunity to look at the question of military veterans, that the support, the incoming NEC must look at the possibility of extending the support to the families of those that are deceased, who are former combatants, because the conditions they found themselves in must be improved. The question of involvement of military veterans, not only in using them on the national key points, others they have other skills, therefore on the issues of economic opportunities. There is an issue that we're also looking just general, the use of paraphernalia by all disbanded structures, whether is it Azanla, MKMVA, the Buderbond, you can name all of them. Because you can't have a situation in a country where there is of access to a paraphernalia that is closer to our security forces. We will have to be able to regulate that matter. It came up very sharply, and including the issues of conduct, that we should be able to look at conduct issues. On private security, nothing has changed, but a discussion and a possible regulation with respect to where private security is using the same uniform like our law enforcement agencies. It creates some challenges. We know that there have been incidents of criminality where people are actually having access either to clothing, to blue lights, other things that they are using. And we said, let's deal with that issue. With respect to the police, we've reconfirmed the question that the number of police must be increased. Remember, the ratio was one police person, around more than 300 citizens to be looked at. We say over a period of 5 years, that number must be able to come to 1:150, so that at least there is issues of visibility there. We also said the issues around the community safety forums. They need to be recognized, participate, and given the resources and the tools of trade. And in traditional communities, we're saying the traditional councils are there. How are they supposed to come in and play an important role? The other issues, I think there's nothing that has changed. But generally from our side, we work in the committee of peace and stability. We're also very involved in terms of securing of this event. We're very pleased that despite all the other issues, the conference has went relatively well from a security point of view. There might have been inconveniences, but the inconveniences were not meant to harm. They were meant to secure all of us so that any unintended consequences could be received here. We thank you.
Thank you, David. Hold on this, you will need it. Okay, can we take questions? Olim Gambi, welcome back, Feriel Havaji. I haven't seen you in a long time. We were missing you. It will be Feriel, it will be Ranjeni, it will be my friend from Cape Town, Sepo, Adrian Basson. That is the first question you're going to ask at this conference.
Thank you very much. Oli from ENCA. Was there any talk around the security, or should I say the intelligence community, rather? There's been lots of complaints in the lead up to this conference that the intelligence community is being used for political reasons, including the current president now of the ANC. Were there any firm resolutions, or did it even come up at all, that issue? Thanks.
Feriel, there's a mic right behind.
Feriel Hafaji from the Huffington Post. Thank you very much, sir. I wonder if I could ask you if the Commission looked at the state of emergency regulations, which we read about last week, and if South Africa is stable, does that mean you've changed your view that we face potential regime change and a colour revolution? This was something you said last year. Thank you.
Ranjeni, Lerato, Best to mention it. On that note of a color revolution.
Thanks very much. I'm Ranjini from TISO Black Star. Minister, just following on Ferial's question, you've previously talked about the involvement of foreign forces in South Africa's domestic affairs. Is that still the view of the ANC? And secondly, the ANC has always been a human rights-based organization. How does the ANC feel about the increased securitization of the state? Thank you.
Marianne Merton-Dale Maverick. You briefly mentioned it about veterans securing national key points, and also, I believe, July said government buildings. Did the discussions actually talk about some of the details? Because obviously the veterans are non-statutory forces in the sense that they're not the SANDF. Are you looking at moves to establish security companies of military veterans? On that point, did the Peace and Security Commissions at any stage discuss the over 18 months delay of Parliament having passed the Private Securities Amendment Bill, and it's still sitting in President Jacob Zuma's in-tray later? And also in terms of the state of emergency regulations, was this discussed in Commission, and even if it wasn't, do you think if South Africa is stable, do we really need to have such discussions at this stage? Thank you.
I'm about to send security to Power FM because they're making noise. Please. Tsepo?
Tsepo Ikane from the SABC.
I have bouncers here.
There's been concern raised about our capability in terms of intelligence gathering and counterintelligence. There's been outstanding issues regarding the airport heights, the bagging, or maybe the in terms of state buildings being marked, and there's been also concerns that the capacity basically of our personnel does not have been sufficient training. During the campaigning by Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, she has bemoaned the fact that since she has left, there's not been much training of our intelligence personnel. So others are even saying that we are below par in terms of our capacity as compared to our African peers, can cite Zimbabwe or Rwanda. How would you like to rate our state of intelligence gathering and capacity? Thanks.
Adrian Bason.
Thank you, Minister. Minister,
It's not me.
Adrian?
It's not me.
We're going to accuse Mahlobo now, I know. We accuse him of all sorts of things, but not.
I hope the mic not working doesn't have anything to do having the former Minister of Intelligence here with us. Minister, 10 years ago the ANC disbanded the Scorpions, which was lauded internationally as a successful agency fighting corruption, after the ANC successfully initiated the Scorpions at a previous conference. Are you still satisfied that we have adequate capacity in government to fight corruption, which I don't need to explain to you is a massive issue in South Africa? Or is there plans to maybe relook having a very specifically focused anti-corruption union? And secondly, we recently saw in Jacques Pauw's book, The President's Keepers, massive revelations about skullduggery in the National Intelligence or the State Security Agency, particularly under Arthur Fraser, the current Director General, when something called the Principal Agents Network was established to apparently, according to the book, run a complete parallel rogue intelligence agency. Is the ANC concerned about these claims, and will you be investigating them? Thank you.
Thabo?
Thank you. Thabo Shalamashau from Hot TV. The first issue is the issue of the briefing of black lawyers. Minister, you'd remember that there was a concern previously in the document that black lawyers were not being briefed sufficiently by government, and that impeded on the developmental state, especially in the judiciary, that you had anticipated. Was there anything concrete that came out of it in terms of a resolution? And the second issue, this one comes from Polokwane. It didn't find resonance in Mangaung. It was the creation of the standalone Ministry for Military Veterans. Was that deliberated upon, and what was the resolution? Thanks very much.
Hi, Peter van der Merwe from Jacaranda FM. Minister, I just quickly wanted to ask with regards to comments that you made in your previous portfolio. You said something to the extent that you are monitoring everyone, and then right to know later revealed that the police is actually monitoring quite a lot of people. Did the committee by any chance discuss the limitations of mass surveillance and with regards balance between South Africans' human rights and obviously the need for security? And then secondly, just to add on to Arjan's question with regards to the State Security Agency, was there any discussion at all with regards to increasing transparency both at the State Security Agency and at Crime Intelligence and the police as well? Thank you.
David?
Well, they look to be too many questions. No, thank you very much. We decided not to give you the full report. Remember, the National Policy Conference report is available on the ANC website. And if you look from page 56 until page 62, those are the issues we concentrated on them, and also looked at the issues that have happened in the last 5 to 6 months. With respect to the issues we are asking around the intelligence services, we never discussed it. But remember last week, we made a press briefing. I was with Comrade Zizi there.
Yes.
And we're very clear that law enforcement agencies must remain apolitical. That's what we said. And the ANC has not changed that particular position. They must serve the government of the day. That's what is expected. And they must place their loyalty to their flag. Where there are instances of a misconduct or a behavior that is unbecoming, there are balance and checks in the system. If you look at the intelligence agencies, we have an office of an inspector general of intelligence, where issues around conduct has to be reported, whether is it defense intelligence, whether is it state security, whether is it crime intelligence. That structure is there. And it's an independent structure that reports to Parliament, which is your joint committee joint standing committee on intelligence. But with respect to police, you'll also remember that there's an IPID. Therefore, the balance and checks in South Africa, they are there. But it does not necessarily mean that people can't behave in a particular way that needs to be brought to book. That's very important to note. And that position still remains. The other issues, whether perceived or real, various incidents must be dealt with. What Ferrell asked with respect to the state of emergency, we never discussed it. Remember that we wanted to have a clear regulation how it needs to be dealt with. Remember the Constitution. For the head of state to declare a state of emergency, there are clear provisions that are there. But the Constitution, for you to be able to know under what conditions and what needs to be done, because all the tenets of the Constitution must either be supported by additional legislation. If it's not legislation, fairly, it should be a regulation. And let's just wait for it to come so that we can see the content of the draft regulations, so that we can be able to say, are they aligned to the constitutional provision or not? But I know that in the Constitution there's a clear mechanism. With respect to color revolution, we did the assessment. Color revolution is not a new phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that happens in many countries, even in our own. It takes various forms. We have said in the past, we will use the issues, we call them aerial curve, where we use issues of getting a narrative there, create kind of imaginary or celebrity leaders. But in the main, the ANC is very cognizant that color revolution will never work unless the ANC minimizes the mistakes it makes. Because they can only succeed if you make mistakes either in terms of governance or the manner we handle our own organization, or the organization has issues of disunity. That's why we maintain these issues. But let's not say color revolution is not there. It takes place in different forms. But you don't want to blame people when you have a capability to be able to handle those issues. Foreign forces, they are here. They have an interest. We also have interest in what is happening everywhere. The only difference is how foreign forces do certain work. If immediately you start to get into issues of espionage, subversion, you deal with it. But we actually have an interest. All of them, they have an interest in us, we have an interest in them. It's just the normal way of a tradecraft. Human rights and security. There are people who think the two are actually in conflict. There is an inherent tension between the two, but they are always mutually dependent. You can't raise the issues of human rights as if they are more important than security matters. Including security people, they can't raise security issues as if they are more important than human rights. They coexist, and it's a very good inherent tension. But it depends on our capability to manage the balance. But there is always a story about those who are human rights activists. They believe that it must be elevated more than anything. Securities themselves, they believe that it needs to do that. That's why those of us who are in leadership, let's find the balance. National key points. The national key points, remember we said, any self-respecting country, it can't be looked after by people who are not South Africans. We raised it. And if we use military veterans, when we talk about military veterans, we're not speaking about MK comrades. We speak about all military veterans. Remember the integration that happened. There are those military veterans that were working for the former apartheid government. Other ones working for the TPV states. Others were working for liberation movements. They are all there. They are all referred as military veterans. Hence, the department is there. The department is confirmed. It has to happen. The resolution is not new. We are expecting implementation. It was implemented in half, remember. But we want it to be a standalone. The legislation, I do agree, Marianne, that it has stayed there for too long. We have actually taken a decision that the president needs to be asked to say, can the process be finalized? Like other legislation that are there. The capability of intelligence, you know, there will be different views, but those people who are actually running them, there are a number of operations they do, whether is it counter-terrorism, the cyber attacks that are happening, and the number of operations. The only difference about intelligence, they don't actually stand on the rooftop and say, we've done this, we've done this. That's what they do. And if there are lapses, it's not that it's actually unique in South Africa. Lapses are happening international. But the reality that we say that South Africa is relatively stable is because of the hard work that men and women that are working in intelligence services, whether state security, crime intelligence, or defense intelligence, they've done a good job. Even those of you who know the work that the FIB actually did in the DRC, if you never had intelligence, how would you have dealt with M23 and others? But there still has to be further training. You can't stop. There must be further training. They must be given more resources. And the issues of the challenges of today, they evolve all the time. And I know when I was deployed there, we've sent them to the best countries in the world. They are properly trained. And they are one of the best. In the continent, they look to us. Question by Adrian. The question around, I will not speak about scorpions. A decision was made long time ago, implemented. Our capacity to fight corruption, I agree, it needs to be enhanced. One, on the question of investigations, but also on the question of speedy prosecution that is successful. We've done a number of instances, a number of investigative reports are sitting there, and we want those reports to people to be brought into court. Go to municipalities, they're having Section 106 reports that are sitting there. Come to provinces, we have the auditor reports that are sitting there, public protector reports that are there, the SIU reports that are there, and the ANC says there is no room for corruption. We just have to implement the things that are there, and including the agencies that deal with anti-corruption agencies. They just must improve their coordination so that they become effective. Well, the book up around Judge Paul, I will not respond. You know that the department concerned in government, it has taken steps. They are within their right. Let's watch the process, how far it will go. You can engage in public, but it's not taking us anywhere. I will have my own view, but it was not what we discussed in plenary. The briefing, Thabo, about black lawyers is a decision that has been made. Now we must just be tested on implementation. It's not only briefing them, but if you brief these black lawyers, you will know that you have a pipeline in terms of the next people who can sit in the bench. And we know that as an ANC government, we think we need to do more because work is only concentrated on few, and the issues of transformation of the judiciary remain that way. The issue around, Peter, on mass surveillance, we never discussed it, but you know that there's an issue about certain people who took government to court around the question of RICA and other issues. Let's allow our courts, which are the best institution, because now there's a dispute, and the dispute can be bestly adjudicated by an institution we trust. Issues around transparency for intelligence, remember intelligence is a trade craft. There is a level of transparency, but there's also a level to say there are issues for operational reasons you can't disclose. That's why the current balance and check of an IG, the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence. Don't even forget that people actually, they even ask questions in Parliament, where ministers of intelligence, they appear there and answer questions. But if it is operational, it's a tradition, international one. It's not a new one. You don't discuss operations. You can discuss policy, hold them accountable for certain things they do, and we will know that activists will always want to push the envelope on transparency. Equally so, those securocrats will say, no, but you're opening us too much. I thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We will take 5 minutes break. The next commission is ready, Legislature and Governance. We'll allow you a few minutes to file and cross live.